Artur Beterbiev is the newly crowned unified light heavyweight champion. He does a lot of things extremely well, and he's demolished every opponent in front of him except for Dmitry Bivol, which will hopefully be a spectacular rematch this upcoming year. In the meantime, let's watch some of his old fights, and let's remember that boxing is a perfect closed system. When you get hit, when you get knocked out, it's because you made a mistake or you misread a situation. Let's look at the people who have fought Beterbiev in the past and see if we can learn from their errors and identify them so that we can have success when we fight. Big shout out to King of Kings Boxing for their Artur Beterbiev highlight that we're using today. Good, in our first fight here, we can already see this is an open exchange, and we've got our first knockdown immediately. We can see with this knockdown, Artur's opponent feints, but when you feint, you're supposed to use the half beat. He feints on the whole beat. He feints, there's a whole beat that passes, and then he tries to step in straight on the line, and that's gonna get you in a lot of trouble. You see he feints and then steps in and runs right into that left hand. Good. In our next moment, you can see he passes square through Artur's cross lane and eats the right hand as a result. And our final knockdown here comes from him being in Artur's closed lane on one foot and not defending himself from the right hand. You can see as he steps through, he hops in, he's on a single foot, and his left hand is nowhere near where it needs to be to protect himself from that big, powerful right of Artur. Our next opponent here, again, a closed exchange, and you can see the same thing happens. He puts himself on Artur's closed side, and he's not prepared for that rear hand attack. He goes down, he pops back up. You can see he's turning away from that right hand, but he's not hiding behind his shoulder the way that you should be, and that's getting him in trouble. You can't simply put your lead hand down and think that that protects you behind your shoulder. The shoulder needs to be very, very, very active. And you can see 3 times, same knockdown, same reason. This next moment certainly happens fast. You can see Artur quickly skip to his left to line his opponent up in his cross lane and then clobber him with the right. And you can see his opponent chases and ends up square. You want to make sure you're never chasing somebody. You are obstructing them. That's very, very important. You are obstructing them, or what do my notes say? You are turning with them. And he tries to exchange with Artur in the middle distance here. But you can see he's hooking on the line. There's a lot of fat on his punches. Artur has him on his left side, so he throws the right hand. Artur has him on his right side, so he throws the left hand. He's shifting head slots back and forth, and he's also selecting the appropriate guard as he does so. His opponent is using a long guard. That's the wrong guard when you're in that close, especially if you're not the much, much, much taller person. Now, I wouldn't want to fight Artur Beterbiev. I'm sure he hits very hard. And you can see a lot of his opponents end up trying to shell up behind that high guard. And we've talked about making that high guard functional. You need to keep moving your head. You need to create some ambiguity on if you're gonna be there or not to hold up the person punching at you so that they lighten up. Because when you've got that high guard up, you're taking chip damage through that guard. And eventually it's gonna compound and you're gonna go down. Artur's next opponent actually drops him midway through this fight, and we'll get to the mistake that Artur made there, but not before Artur does some damage. Some people might call it cheap. I would say the first rule of boxing is protect yourself at all times. If his head's stuck in the ropes, he should wait with his head through the ropes to keep himself safe and away from Archer's attacks until the referee comes back in. If he takes the time to swing back in, he needs to defend when he does so. But he gets back up and he's ready to fight. Right there, he gets buzzed by a big right hand. And that's because you can see when they both punch here, Archer gets his head offline, his opponent, head is stationary. And that's what gets him in trouble. I have guys ask me all the time, they say, Coach, should I move my head every time I punch? No. If you're off to an angle or you've taken a nice advantageous lane and the person's on your far side, you don't need to move your head when you punch. But if you're on the line, you better move your head when you punch. Otherwise, you're gonna trade. But he gets his feet back under him, he throws his high guard up, he tries to fix his posture, and they start exchanging again. Archer gets a little carried away here, and he gets dropped by a 3. And this is just depth of block. You got to remember that you're putting that hand, depending on your distance and range to the person and the shot they select, where you think that that shot's going to land. And Archer, though he has his hand up, it's too deep and it's not protecting the front of his face, and he gets dropped. But it's about getting back up, not about never getting hit. Roberto Duran has a quote that I love, good boxers get hit. Great boxers don't get hit with the same thing twice. So Archer's right back in the fray there. And this final drop is really just about his opponent overstaying his welcome in that exchange. You can see when Archer is in exchanges, he's always looking to find his way around or out or through the person. You don't just want to stand there on the line whipping shots, especially against somebody who's a good boxer and has good discipline for their hands and their head position. You give somebody who's a good counterpuncher 100 punches and you're just giving them 100 chances to counter you. You got to pick your moments on your terms, you got to lead on your terms. Moving on to our next opponent here. We see excellent discipline in these middle distance exchanges from Beterbiev. His hands always come back to his face. They always come off of his face. He's doing a great job of like fighting out of the shell here. Beautiful, good same side return. And as he's doing this, you can see he's always trying to creep to one side or the other. Usually it's his right. We're gonna talk about this a lot. But moving to your right is a very overpowered strategy in boxing. Because when you get to the right, you've got this person pincered in between your hands, just like there. And you can come up their center line with your left hand and over their shoulder or behind their arm with your right hand. And Beterbiev wields this very, very, very well. I like watching these older fights of Archer's because we can see what will likely happen in the rematch with Bivol when they both push a little bit harder. I think we'll get a little more of an action fight the second time around. I've heard the announcers, Teddy Atlas, describe Beterbiev as a steam engine. He might start slow, but he picks up a head of steam and he makes it happen. And the ref's been on Archer's opponent this whole time. He's looking for a reason to stop it. And that's that. If you guys have learned something new today, or you're starting to put together all of our lessons on positioning, punch selection, and lane theory, give us a like or a share or a subscribe. That helps us grow a lot as we close in on 10K subscribers. The Gvozdyk fight was a fun one and was Beterbiev's first real step-up fight. And Gvozdyk is a well-schooled fighter. He knows how to box, but I can't imagine trying to be in there for 12 rounds with somebody that hits as hard as Archer does. You can see in that exchange there, He's letting Artur lead. And because Artur's leading, he's playing catch up with his feet. Right there, you can see he ends up on one foot on Artur's open side. There's nowhere for that force to go. You don't have your weight even to dissipate and absorb that force. You get hit with that shot, and all that can happen is that power echoes around in your head. Yep, you gotta recognize that if somebody's on your right side, they're probably gonna hit you with their left hook, all right? And you gotta get that hand up, or you gotta get your base under you if you wanna keep moving so that you don't tank all that power on one leg. Good examples of nice disciplined boxing from Beterbiev. He gets his head offline when he punches. You can see right at the start here. But then we've also got to talk. That shot that knocked down Gvozdyk, though the writing might have been on the wall, was definitely to the back of the head. Beterbiev lands to the back of the head more than most. I'm not saying it's on purpose, but he certainly does it when he's swarming on guys. I think that's because he's just excited. But you also got to remember it's a fight. And it's a fight. Somebody's going to try to finish you. It's your responsibility to protect yourself at all times. That knockdown is a classic situation where you can see as Artur comes in, he takes one big step through, switches to southpaw, and then throws with his left hand that is now his rear hand because he's in a southpaw stance. It's a powerful shot. If you look at a lot of Marvin Hagler's knockouts back in the day, he sets them up this way as he shifts through stances and alters which side is his power side hand and the angle that punches can come from. It makes it very, very challenging for your opponent to keep track of what lane they are in as you switch stances. Good. As the fight progresses, you see these guys try to slug it out. And right there is just a demonstration of good technique allowing you to survive exchanges. Something I say to my guys a lot: strategy wins fights. Tactics and tactical adjustments win rounds, but good technique allows you to survive exchanges long enough for any of those tactics or strategies to even matter. You can see in the slow motion here, you can see how tight the hook is from Artur. You can see how wide the hook is from his opponent. And you can also see that Artur's hand is up and his opponent's is not. Of course, he wins that exchange. Beterbiev's next opponent here is a southpaw, and he's got a good high guard, and he's got good visibility. He's usually on base. He survives a long time in there and even fights back really successfully in spurts against Artur, but eventually he just whittles him down. Again, that chip damage adds up. Those glancing shots add up. That fatigue in your legs and your low back and your neck to be able to withstand punches adds up. Something my old coach and mentor Bob Miller used to say is you never saw a fresh guy quit. And what he means by that is when you're in shape and when your fitness is high, you've got access to all of your speed. You can think clearly. You're not tired. You're powerful. And that allows you to problem solve because you're not running out of tools. Fatigue makes cowards of us all. So you got to be in stellar shape as well as being a stellar boxer. You can see Artur is pairing those hooks and uppercuts. He knows how to dismantle a guard. In that particular situation there, you see his opponent tries to lean back and leverage that extra support you get from the ropes to escape from a punch. But the problem with that is you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. You are losing your base. You're losing the ability to do anything else following that. I used to have a coach in Ontario named George Lewis, and he used to say you only get one butt cheek on the ropes. So when you hit the ropes, you don't square up. You stay in a stance where you have access to all of your techniques and you've got lots of reps in. And you can see Artur's bloody in this fight too. I've never watched this fight in its entirety, but we're already in the 7th round here. And you can definitely see, just like we talked about before, Artur creeps side to side when he's in exchanges. Whether he's walking to his right or he's walking to his left, he tries to put himself in a space where his trailing hand can attack center line and his nearest hand can go behind the guard, whether high or low. We do get a knockdown here despite his opponent's excellent defenses, and the reason for that is because of the order of operations with how you should line up, again, that half guard. When you're using that half guard, it is not shoulder, hand, and then chin. Because then your head is side on and it is leverage. There's purchase here that can turn your head. It's important to remember that the order of operations, if you're using that half guard, is shoulder, chin, and then hand or hand. Because this way you can stabilize your chin to your shoulder, shots glance and slide off of you, and you're in alignment to absorb force. You're not here where even a shot in your guard is going to turn your head and hurt you. That order of operations matters. And we talked, it's the fatigue that eventually wears you down. I always feel that way when I'm sparring with active competitive pros. I have the skills to hang with them, but I can tell that if they're in 12-round shape and I'm not, it's just a matter of time in a real fight before they'd whittle you away. And that's why being in shape is so important. And you can see here Beterbiev just eroding an otherwise skilled southpaw and defensively sound opponent in front of him. And as those legs get tired, you can see that weight shifts more forward and backward, side to side, and it gets harder to be strong enough and springy enough to absorb that force. And Beterbiev kind of looks like Canelo here, where I think he can tell he's got the power advantage and it's just a matter of time before it all turns over. And that's the beginning of the end right there. That big shot starts it, and then that 5 finishes it. And 9 rounds with Beterbiev, you got to respect his opponent in here because he is a hard puncher. Our final set of clips here is with Joe Smith Jr. As promised. And you can see the big thing that gets Joe in trouble here, he gets knocked down 3 times in almost the same way, where he's shorting his jab. He comes in, and I know you should pump that jab, but you also got to select the right punch for the right range. And you can see he's in range for Beterbiev to throw a right hook when he's jabbing. And that clips him several times. There it was the first time. Good, that was just a slip. There it is the second time. If you're only bringing your elbow out to 90 degrees when you're jabbing, you should consider maybe throwing a punch where your elbow's supposed to be at 90 degrees, especially if you're a tall guy like that, giving up your height. By the time you fold it down that far, you're no longer in a mechanically strong position again to absorb that force. Fun little shootout there. Let's check that out again. You can see Beterbiev catching and pitching off the same side, being nice and responsible with his guard, and also using his first line of defense, which is distance, to get Joe Smith Jr. chasing, and again, selecting a jab from too close of a range so Beterbiev can land the right. This is a really, really important engagement and an important lesson because Joe Smith Jr. definitely understands these concepts. He's a better boxer than I am. But it's important that muscle memory matters. If you can't stop yourself from doing something, even if it's an otherwise good tactic, like using that jab to come in, then it's a liability. Greg Jackson talks about in his striking book, I know he's an MMA coach, but these principles are the same. He says, being predictable is as bad as doing something wrong. In this final exchange, you can see Joe Smith Jr. tries to throw a 4 on the line, and he loses out to a simultaneous counter of a 6. You got to remember, when you throw your rear hand, you're twice as vulnerable as when you throw your lead hand. You're not just vulnerable over your lead shoulder, you're vulnerable over your rear shoulder and up your center line. And that, again, cumulative damage eventually gets the job done, and the ref waves this off. You need to take extreme accountability when you fight. That's why I do these tape studies. If you get hit, it's because you made a mistake or you misread the situation. We highlight these mistakes when we see knockdowns or knockouts because the ramifications of that error are apparent immediately. You should learn from somebody else's mistakes because that's going to help you be a better fighter so you can have more success and you can take accountability when you fight.